to do within the festival a really fun, slightly punk attitude brown girl in the ring event where I jump up alongside lots of other people and play a little bit. It wasn't even so conscious as like, let me make sure there's a strong
Yeah.
percentage of South Asian representation. It was just these are the artists I love.
Hi everyone, it's Silas Ram, AsianCultureVulture.com. How are you doing? I'm delighted you're joining me. We're talking to the artist and musician Anoushka Shankar about a guest directing Brighton Festival this year. It's a multi-arts festival which is running through nearly the whole of May. It's on the south coast in Brighton, and she'd invited a few South Asian artists. She talks about that. She talks about her new album and her artistic practice. Take it away, Anoushka Shankar.
Brighton's an incredible city. I think it's one of our really vibrant spots in the UK. It's got a very particular atmosphere and environment and culture to it. And it really is a situation with Brighton Festival where the whole city feels like it's gotten taken over by the festival, a bit like Edinburgh in August. So everywhere you walk, you're going to be surprised by some free outdoor event or something that's happening. Every venue is having something. So it's a really exciting and inspiring time to visit because you might go for something you know that you love, but there's definitely going to be something you don't know that you might love as well.
And is there anything that you're really looking forward to? I know it's very difficult being the guest director, and you would have had a hand in a lot of or nearly all of this. But is there anything that you are particularly personally,
Yeah.
relishing?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to pick, but there are a few that come to mind because Aruna Sairam collaborating with Ganavya, for example, is a pretty rare collaboration. They're two very different artists. One is a decades-long legend of Carnatic music, and one is a new star in the music world. And so, what they're going to do together, I'm very curious to see. Maithili Prakash is one of my favorite artists. And she uses the medium of Bharatanatyam in a very unique and very modern way to tell very emotional current stories. And so I'm really looking forward to seing her piece.
Can you talk a little about Rumination? Aditya Prakash, Mithili Prakash's brother, because I had a chat with him, and
Yeah,
I'm looking at.
I was actually going to mention him. Yeah, so
Yeah,
he's very different from his sister, but they share a commonality in their real depth of classical art form training and knowledge, but using that as a very free language. It's and so through his music, he's been developing a very particular sound over the last few years, and then this piece, Rumination, moves beyond a kind of conventional concert concept, and it's more a piece of theater, and it's performance and dialogue and music, and it's this one person show where he's doing all of these things, and it's got really strong political themes, and I think it's really exciting. It's a very
yeah.
brave piece of
Is that important to you as an artist, understanding, appreciating the tradition and what has come before?
For 20 years of my 30 years making music, it's been non-classical and more in what I guess you'd call the innovative or
Yeah.
cross-cultural space. So I'm very much open. But I think there is something about being connected to depth, or being given like the true weight of a heritage or a history, or these kind of great classical art forms. They have so much in them to offer, both within the tradition and outside of it, because what it can train you to do, how it can train your brain to think, how it can give you discipline, all of these things affect any other styles you work on or any other thing. So to have the privilege of that grounding, I think I think, yeah, that's really important. It's not essential. It's not the only way to be an artist, but I think it's really important.
Yeah. So you think it gives you that grounding and then the ability to kind of experiment or
It's like when I move into these spaces, like this week, I've done some really diverse recordings with different genres of artists, and or my flamenco Indian classical band where people didn't even speak the same language, or working with electronic music, like moving into all these different spaces, but having the training to be able to have a really good, strong ear, to improvise, to to come up with complex ideas on the spot. Like all of that comes from my classical training, even if in that moment I'm not doing anything classical whatsoever. But my brain was trained by it, so it's like having a strong grasp of literature. We may not all be writing Shakespeare, but to read Shakespeare as a writer would be important, or Tagore, or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah. Talk about how the concept of the new dawn came, and what I can see is a lot of kind of connections from all over the place that you're drawing together, and kind of where you are as an artist.
When Brighton Festival asked me to come and be guest director for the overall festival
Sure.
2025, they said there was always a theme, and it came to me instantly that I wanted it to be New Dawn, because of the work I was working on in my own
Mm.
career at the time. I've been doing a process over the last 2 years of doing three mini albums,
Yes, yes.
tell a story across the three albums, about exactly that, moving from a pain or a global difficulty into a kind of space of healing and reset in order to come into a new dawn of a new world, a stronger, better place. And it was so kind of at the forefront of my consciousness, that
Yeah.
type of thinking, that it felt like a lovely thing to extend into a larger festival, overall, to have
Yeah.
work across mediums that's talking about those kind of themes.
Sure.
And so that was very central, and it's been, I believe that themes can be more or less closely adhered to depending on the year, and I think this one's a really strong one, like a lot of
Yeah.
the work across the whole festival.
What do you think was driving that idea of new dawn personally for you?
There's so much in the world that feels like we're kind of moving in the wrong direction again and again, and I just couldn't help feeling like maybe some bigger reset, like a real pause, like the pandemic could have been. I remember in the early days we were all saying, God, maybe we could go differently from here. We've all stopped, and then we just kind of went back the same way. So like a true pause and of reflection in order to do something different, and have a more positive world. Which, in the personal, it's more of it's more like a difficulty, a pain, a hurt, needing to take that pause to heal, to acknowledge the difficulty, learn from it, and then moving to a stronger, better place.
You've been touring in America just quite recently. What did you gauge from your when you were there in America?
What I found was a lot of despondency, a lot of upset people. And we were playing this music. These were the three chapters I'm touring. So we're talking about, pause for change and healing and having the strength to carry on in difficult times. And so it felt like a very close relationship with the audience everywhere, because people really seemed to lean into what we were putting out there on stage.
Yeah. And do you think then that New Dawn has a sense of resilience about it? Being
Absolutely.
strong in difficult moments and when things are very challenging?
It's about strength, but I think perhaps it's even more about hope, because sometimes we're not strong. That's the whole point. Sometimes we're completely broken, and sometimes we don't know the way forward. And a little shred of hope can help us keep going until we are finally in a self-fulfilling prophecy of that change, because we kept moving towards it. If we don't have hope, then that self-defeatist strategy means there is nothing to hope for, because
Yeah,
you give
sure.
up, right?
Do you sense that they're coming into a new dawn or a new space which they can face up to what's happening and that they can turn the page, as it were?
On a sad day, I'm reading the news a lot, and I feel really hopeless and despondent, because it feels like everywhere is breaking, and where do we go from here? And the world is ending and everything's horrible. And then I go on tour, and we're across continents and meeting all the people who are feeling like this, and who are rising up, and who are, creating shifts in their communities or in their creativity or whatever it may be in their family, and it's inspiring.
The vision you had for Brighton Festival and the New Dawn, did you have artists in mind, or was it a case of finding the artists who would work well for the concept?
Both. I mean, I had a wish list of artists I really love and admire, that I'm personally inspired by. And they were just kind of on there because they make that kind of inspiring work. And then from there, we were thinking thematically and broadening out into, like, how do we represent the themes across all the artistic mediums? So it was a bit of both.
And did you enjoy that process?
I've done some curation over the last few years, and so I've already found that I love it. It feels like a natural extension of the way I think in my music. What things work well together, what things may challenge each other, what will complement, and it's kind of like the same thinking process, but outside of my own work and more in a space, and a lovely way to spotlight other people and other work and other artists. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and you obviously like the multidisciplinary, aspect of the festival.
I would almost say I get more overt inspiration from other art forms that feed into my music than from music itself. Somehow when I listen to music, I'm listening as a listener. Whereas when I watch dance or when I see theater, like the way it affects me and makes me think about things, it changes me as an artist. And
Oh, yeah.
I think that cross-pollination is so important. And I think, it's just really exciting to have a festival like Brighton where everything's happening, all across the.
And was it a very conscious decision to have yourself in the program? There must have been that thought, can I take time? I mean, you're appearing more than once, so.
I often bite off more than I can chew, and then having to now deliver more than I'm meant to. But I from a I guess from a more selfishly, not selfish, but like from my own career perspective, I thought it would be nice to do a few very different things within one space
Yeah.
because my work has always been so diverse, but I don't always get to present that in a more current way. It's usually whatever I'm touring that year, and then I don't go to that city for another 2 years. And so to do within the festival a really fun, slightly punk attitude brown girl in the ring event where I jump up alongside lots of other people and play a little bit, to do, passages by my father and Philip
Yeah.
Glass with a full orchestra, choir, Indian ensemble, and then to present my own very current work with my band and my music and all the themes that the festival has been about. That's really lovely for me as an artist to get to do that in one space.
There are a lot of South Asian performers, a lot of South Asian dance music. How important was that for you to represent that side of your culture, upbringing, background?
Well, it's a huge part of my artistic identity. So it's a huge part of what I love. So it very natural. It wasn't even so conscious as like, let me make sure there's a strong
Yeah.
percentage of South Asian representation. It was just these are the artists I love. This is the work I love. Um, and I think it's really nice that we've got a good mix of very traditional South Asian art being represented, but also very, very innovative. Also South Asian people who aren't necessarily making quote unquote South Asian work. It goes beyond that and is not of that. So there's a real range across the mediums, which I find really exciting.
And what about you personally, post festival? What's next on your
So
agenda?
the third chapter of my 3 album process just released in March, so I'm still touring that across the year. So my final show in the festival is that, and then I'll continue that across the summer at festivals around Europe.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, and all the best. Good luck. I hope to see you down there at some point.